Good afternoon, everybody, or indeed good morning, depending on where you are logging in from. Welcome to the Strategy Leaders webinar, How to Kill a Company, Troubleshooting Strategy Execution Failures. My name is Rob Sahi from Informa Middle East. I am the Conference Director for Strategy Leaders Forum, which takes place in Dubai in April. The Strategy Leaders Forum will take place at the Address Dubai Marina and will feature 3 global gurus and 6 hands-on workshops, including a workshop by Antonio, who will be your workshop leader today for this webinar. Also at the event, there will be up to 32 strategy leaders from throughout the region, including CEOs from companies like GE Healthcare, Abdul Latif Energy, Starcom MediaQuest, and many others, and strategy leaders and CSOs from DP World, Aqua Holding, Emirates and Emirates MUD, and many others. And the main guru of strategy leaders will be Rita McGrath, currently number 6 in the Thinkers 50 list of management gurus globally, and professor at Columbia University. And we will also have Jerome de Flandre, who is an excellent speaker on strategy execution and is back by popular demand after being fantastic at the event last year. Before the webinar, I'd like to go through a couple of housekeeping points with you guys. Firstly, the webinar will be recorded and an email will be sent tomorrow with a link to all the files and slides. And please do remember you can share that link with whoever you feel may be interested in the content you're about to see today. Questions can be posed at any time during the webinar by using the text box on your screen. The questions will be answered by Antonio at the end of the webinar. Any questions we can't get through today will definitely be answered later and will be posted on the website. There's also a feedback box that you will find at the end of the webinar. Please do use that box and take the opportunity to give us any feedback you might have felt on the proceedings. And now, without further ado, let me introduce today's presenter, Antonio Nieto Rodriguez. He's a professor at Duke Corporate Education and author of the acclaimed book, The Focused Organization. He is featured in several magazines, including The Economist, Singapore Management Institute, and Strategy Business Review. He is the founder of one of the largest groups on LinkedIn for strategy execution, which has over 5,000 members worldwide. And please do remember, Antonio will be holding one of the workshops at Strategy Leaders in April, and I'm sure he'll tell you more about that during his talk. So Antonio, please, over to you.
Thank you, Rob. I also wanted to share that that besides what you just mentioned, I have a full-time job at GSK, GlaxoSmithKline Beecham, and where I head the PMO. I'm setting up their project management, project portfolio management practices. So I do face most of the issues that the people in the conference will be facing. So I can relate to that during my presentation. So thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure always working with you guys. And I love the way you organize these events, and the participants, the ones I've seen in Doha and Riyadh last year were amazing. So I'm looking very much forward for the event in Dubai in a couple of months. So the purpose of the session today is a short one. It's going to be mainly to trigger a bit of your thoughts and make you aware of some of the topics we will be addressing during the conference in general and in my session. So just to give you some highlights and share with you some thoughts and some of my research. So I spent a lot of time, really maybe 10 years already, working on execution, on strategic initiative management, on project management. I'm actually very, very much involved with PMI, the Project Management Institute. So I wanted to start with that. I wanted to share with you why some things happen and based on research. So it's not just my views. One of the first things that I did, and this was partially for my book, but also in general for me to understand and do my job better, previously in a bank, now in a pharmaceutical, was I found out that looking at companies that I was competing against in banking or pharma, when I look at their strategic objectives, they are actually very similar. Most of the companies that I notice working in my space, they all wanted to grow. They all wanted to expand. They wanted to keep market share. They wanted to keep sustainability, shareholder value. So everybody wanted a bit the same. It's a bit like a race. We all want to win, and the rules are clear, and the target is clear, and the finish line is clear. So it made me think and go a bit deeper. So I took like the Fortune 500 companies. I look at the top 25. This is 2013 figures, and I look at this in particular. This is top 10. Which of these companies wanted to grow? Which of them wanted market share increase? And you see that with the tick mark, the green one. So ExxonMobil at that time was the largest company in the world, well, they didn't care too much about customer satisfaction. They're number one. They can afford that. But the rest, it was something they care about. How about the rest? Well, the rest actually want the same. So just stating that we're in a world where information flows very fast, and it's very easy to know what your competition is doing. So I started to wonder if companies all want to achieve very similar objectives. Where's the difference? Many of these big known companies fail, actually. I'll share with you very briefly a few examples of my research. Blockbuster was one of the leading video rental companies in the US. They also expanded internationally. They filed for bankruptcy a few years ago. They didn't cope with the market changes as fast as they had to. The competition as well, internet was, and some other companies came in very, very fast, unexpected. The same goes for Borders. That's one of the largest bookstore retailers. They didn't see Amazon coming. They didn't believe in Amazon. They didn't think it would take them over, and yet they did. So they finished really bad. They're still slightly surviving, but will never be the big company it was at one point. Enron was another case of a big company, one of the largest companies in terms of revenues in the world at one point. But there, instead of the market or the competition, they had some issues internally. I'll summarize some of these factors on how to kill a company. And this one was more internal. They were greedy. They were playing with the books, cooking the books, and of course, sooner or later, they fail. WorldCom was, again, one of the largest U.S. telecom companies, also kind of wrongdoing. So here you have two companies where the people side, where the ethics played a big role in bringing down these two very, very huge companies. WorldCom had at one point 80,000 employees. So that's a good example of how to kill companies if the leaders don't play according to the rules. Now we go into the financial crisis. You know these names. So Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns, they were pushed to grow, and grow every year, 10, 20%, bringing more shareholder value every year to their shareholders. It's very hard to sustain those growth numbers. So they had to take too much risk. They invested in the wrong places. They developed these products, toxic products, which in the end they found out, and everybody found out, that there was nothing behind. It was a sort of scam. So two huge companies were killed in very short time. This happens in a couple of weeks. They were out and sold just for $1 US. Other ones, the Compaq, I don't know if you remember, but they were one of the largest PC manufacturers and sellers in the 90s, in the 80s. I think my first PC was, I don't remember, it was a Toshiba, but I certainly had the Compaq in 85 or so, the newest. And what happens, again, the cost, they couldn't compete with the cost. Very fast came Dell. I don't know if you remember, Dell came with a very different model than the usual PC producers, and they took over very big market share. So Compap didn't cope with that. They were still very high on their cost for manufacturing, and the revenue started to stagnate, so they were eaten out by HP. It was one of the largest mergers in this sector. I think it was about 2002. Another sector which is very interesting, and you can learn also how to kill a company, is Arthur Andersen. This is a bit more related to the previous cases on Enron and WorldCom. Arthur Andersen was one of the largest accounting, law, and consulting firm for many, many years. At one point there were 8 big companies. PW merged with Coopers & Lybrand, so that's PwC today. And Arthur Andersen was involved in the Enron scandal. So as these companies work on credibility, if your credibility in the market goes down, you don't get customers. People don't want to work with you, especially on accounting, which is you're giving some trust to the markets. If you're not trust yourself, then of course it collapsed. So it ended very bad. They split up the company. Arthur Andersen's some part became Accenture, what you know today as Accenture, but really a good example of how to kill a company again. And last for this brief introduction is airlines. I don't know if anybody flew with Pan Am, but it was one of the elite airlines. It was they call it pop art. So it was nice to fly with Pan Am. One of the first airlines which became international. Here they were not able to cope with the new technologies. They again, running cost became too high, very little investment, new ideas, so they were taken over. The same for Trans World Airline, better known as TWA. It was one of these, together with Pan Am, one of the earliest ones to be known, very famous. And sadly, again, they didn't cope. They were not able to keep the costs down, efficiency, running the business, while they were not able to adapt. So basically, many big companies fail. It's very hard for any organization to survive more than 17 years. Past that, it's very hard. So here's a summary of some of the reasons I've seen companies for failure, or if you want to look at it, how you should cool a company, you should be doing this. So the market needs change faster than the organization. So if you're not looking at your market, what's next? What are the trends? What do the customers? They talk about the voice of the customer. What do your customers want? What are they expecting? Unless you're Apple, where you kind of determine in advance what they want, most of us in our organizations, we need to listen to the customers. If you don't, that's a good recipe for killing your company. The second part is the competitions. You need to watch the competition. You need to see what they're doing, what's the next. On their pipeline, how do the pipeline looks like? I work now in pharma, and it's pretty important to know what the competition is doing, what are their new products in their pipeline, and how can we compete with them. So these are 2 things. If you don't watch the market trends and your customers, and you don't watch out what the competition is doing, you have good chances of failure. Another aspect is your cost base increases faster than the growth. So most companies that are growing, they don't control that much the cost. The focus is on revenue, top line growth, and they forget about controlling the cost base. So they're spending, salaries are increasing, and at one point the growth stagnates and the cost keeps being high. That happens with one of the banks I was working in the past. We wanted to be an international bank, bought companies, banks outside, and then suddenly the banking collapsed, but we had the structure which was 4 times bigger than any bank in the country. We had 25,000 employees, while the rest of the banks in the country had 8,000. So huge gap, and the past years were just about trying to control that cost base. Another big issue, and I do speak in quite a lot of events or run workshops with senior leaders, is the pressure to deliver on the short term. The trade-offs of what's urgent, towards what's important. And I'll show you an example of too much short-term, too much focus on running today's business while forgetting what's happening next, what is going to happen. Where are we going to get our revenues in a year or two or even 5? Very few companies look at that, and if you're just focused on the short term and you get the pressure of the markets as well, the financial markets, they want to know how are you doing every month, every quarter, which drives all the attention of top management. That's a big issue, and it's a good cause for failure. Also, when you take the wrong investment decisions, you decide to go to a market where you think you will make good benefits, maybe China or Brazil or Africa, and suddenly nothing works. It's not like you had to plan, or you decide to take over another company, and the synergies that you had planned on paper never happen. So taking the wrong choices, taking the wrong strategies, it's also a reason for failure and destroying of a company, of the cases I've seen. And then you have two aspects which I already referred to, is the poor leadership. When there's no leadership or strong culture where people are encouraged to develop, to grow, to take their own responsibility, or on the other part, there's some unethical behavior due to the pressure, this creates also sooner or later a point where there's no return, and that happens like I show you with Enron, WorldCom, some of the banks. You kill the reputation and everything goes down, like Arthur Andersen. So just to summarize, these are the things that you need to look at. You always need to have a look at the external environment. And that you have models like the Porter 5 forces, the pest analysis. So there's ways to do that, to look at the external environment. Internal is the way you run your organization, design the organization, the process, the tools, the systems, all around your organization. So if you don't manage that, well, there's a big chances that sooner or later you disappear. And last is on the people, the individuals, the culture, that you need to watch out through. Again, so I'm not telling you anything new. Maybe the structure is different, but for me, in order to develop a strong strategy execution framework and to avoid these pitfalls that we see again and again and again throughout the history of management, is the alignment of these three elements. So you need to watch out the market, you need to have a good organization, flexible, agile, with expertise, good people, and then you need to have some strong values and strong leadership. So that would be for me like the perfect strategy execution framework. And it seems obvious when you look at this. I'm not telling you anything that you didn't know. Maybe a couple of things resonate already, but why is it so difficult then to execute the strategy? Why is it so difficult to work on these 7 or 8 areas? Why is it? I did further some research, and this one you can do yourself, but I went to Google, and in Google you can just put strategy execution framework, and you see what you get. This is what I got. Basically, you can do the same. It's a bit of a mess. There's no one single framework that addresses the external, the internal, the people side. So some of them they try. So you see somewhere here on the bottom left the balanced scorecard, which is probably the model which is most widely used in the world. Kaplan, Norton, you've seen him maybe in the past in the conference organized by Irma. That's the highest one. That's I think one of the topics that comes every time you talk about strategy execution, strategy leadership, and it will be part of the session in April. This is a very good model, and that's why it's bringing back again by Rob and his team. The other one you see here on red is the 8. The 8 is the model of Jeroen de Flanders. I work with him. We have quite a lot of discussions around which framework to use. His model is pretty simple, 8. I don't think it covers everything, but it's easy to understand. And then you have lots of others. So there's no really secret formula here. That's the issue, and everybody needs to find their own way. I wish and hopefully in the future there will be a framework that companies could use to execute their strategy and work on the people, on the organization, and watching the market. One of the issues I see, there's not enough awareness on the senior executive team on execution. And here again, I spent a lot of years researching why the executives, the CEO, the C-suite, like they call it, are not too worried about having a strategy execution framework. Why do they don't have a strategy execution officer or an office and practices? And I'm shocked every time I talk to executives about this, because they do acknowledge that it's important, but as it's so complex and difficult, they do focus somewhere else. They just implement the balanced scorecard and it stays there. So one of my biggest concerns has been this lack of awareness and understanding on the top leadership teams on the importance of execution. So I have several research on this topic, but I'll just share one which for me explains one of why these leadership teams they don't really understand the importance of strategy execution. At least this is what I see in Europe, in the US. I think in the Middle East there's a bit more understanding, and I see that when I go to the conferences, that the people who participate are often senior leaders who really take 3 days, 4 days to go through the sessions, even to the workshops. So I have to admit that you guys in the Middle East, you are at least more aware and keen to learn new practices or best practices. So, but just to give you an idea, I don't know if you recall these big gurus. These are people who have influenced a lot the way organizations are run today. So these are big thinkers. We call them management gurus. So just let me start with the guy here. I'll let you think. This guy developed the first car, which was accessible or affordable by many. Developed the T model. It was a black car, 1920s, 1915s, so exactly 100 years ago. And his name is Henry Ford. Henry Ford. He transformed the way organizations were run at that time. 100 years ago, he introduced much more efficient processes. He talked about customization and non-customization, just providing the same models so to have economies of scale. So very, very influential guy who transformed businesses. Second, on the bottom, this guy you might know, he talks about total quality management. TQM is the father of TQM. And what happens with this guy, he was not very successful in the US, and he went to Japan. And he developed his theories in Japan, and they love him in Japan. So Deming is his name. Every Japanese company supplies TQM to it. It's more maybe Six Sigma at this stage, but he was the founder. So again, a guy who transformed the way businesses are run. Frederick Taylor is the father of scientific management. He was the first guy who went to plants, factories, and was checking every step on the chain. He was counting, and with a clock watch, he was stopping and measuring how much time it would take for each chain to produce the product. So it was a bottom-up approach first time. That's why he's called the father of scientific management, because he started to improve processes, bottom-up approach. The other guys are Peter Drucker, which you know, Michael Porter, Five Forces, one of the biggest gurus today, still alive. Henry Mintzberger, he talks about Safari, marketing Safari, and he started to talk a lot about strategy, and Michael Hammer. In the research I did, I look at 15 of these guys, gurus. I try to see how many of them talk about strategy execution, how many say you should use strategy execution, and this is how you should apply it. And to my surprise, None of these guys, none of these very, very influential people in their books, in their white papers, talk about strategy execution, don't even mention the word. So the big thinkers, they forgot about strategy execution suddenly. During the workshop I will be running in Dubai, I'll give you more of these facts and eye-openers, because for me this was very revealing. Another very interesting research is today in Google you can look at how many books have been published. I don't know if you Google Books, they have digitalized all the books that have been published from 1800 to 2000. And you can search by keywords. And here what I did is I took the keywords strategy, strategy execution, marketing, accounting, finance, and project management. You see in the chart below over the last 100 years how many books and have been published with the words. So what you see is the first half of the 19th, the keyword was finance. It was about cost control. It was about creation of value, expanding the business. That was the top word. That's what people were writing about. Look at the bottom on that period till the 50s. Strategy, execution, project management. Probably no book had mentioned that. No book. That's incredible. No book. What you see going further is between finance and accounting, it goes up and down. So accounting becomes, that's why all these big accounting firms, PwC, Arthur Andersen, Ernst & Young, they all started during those periods. So it was the most important terms. If you would have a conference that the one we'll have in Dubai 100 years ago, it will not be on strategy, it will be on finance and accounting. What happens in the 40s, 50s, strategy, the green line, you see how it goes up? It's amazing. That's where all the business schools starts to appear. Harvard, Columbia, Wharton. In Europe you have INSEAD, London Business School, Instituto de Empresa. So strategy became the big fashion word in the last 40, 50 years, top of the league. Top of the league, and you see a big gap. Marketing also came up very fast and now is the second one on my list because it's about creation, branding. So very interesting chart. It tells you a lot of what matters today to executives. I have more and I'll tell you. But the message here is, where is strategy execution? Where is project management? Huge gap. Huge gap, which explains a lot of what are currently happening. There's, for me, a big execution dilemma, and the more I research, the more I see in my own job, it's a huge challenge. To be successful implementing your strategy and be there for the long term, you need to do two very different things. One, you need to run your business. You manage and run your business, your today. But at the same time, please don't forget to change it while you run it. So that creates a big dilemma. That's what I call the big execution dilemma. And just briefly, let me explain you quickly this. I'll go more in detail during the plenary and then in my workshop on the 30th of April. But running the business is the key. It's the core process, is where you have sales, marketing, supporting process, finance, you have production. That's how you run it. That's how you make your products. It generates most of the revenues, and it's just surviving. You need to be alive. On the other hand, you have the strategic initiatives, which is about changing the business, the future. If you don't invest on the future, you're going to be dead. It's going to happen like the companies we saw, Pan Am, TWA. That's going to happen to you if you don't invest here. It's about strategic. It's about change and transformation, strategic initiatives. How about the objectives? The objectives, running your business, is pretty much short-term. That's what drives the organization. They're pretty much predictable. You know how much you produce. You expect certain amount of demand. So the targets are commercial, sales, financial, effectivity, and performance. That's what matters there to run your business. What happens with the strategic initiatives? The objectives are medium long term. They're closer to your strategic vision, so it's more the ambition. The only issue here is that the benefits are less tangible. There's high risk on this. You don't know. You invest today in a potential partnership, a product, a new market. You don't know yet if you're going to make any benefit, if any. Okay, so it's two different worlds. And the way you organize yourself to run the business, it's about efficiency, productivity. You need to go fast. That's why what I call silo organization, this departmental, functional, that most organizations are structured today, is perfect. So that's how you are efficient to run your business. You standardize, you automate, you introduce an ERP system like SAP, you outsource part of it. And it's based on technical expertise. The people need to know what they do and become expert. What happens on strategic initiatives? It's totally different organization. It's flexible. It has to be agile. You work with experts across the different departments. It's not repetitive. You cannot automate a project or a strategic initiative. So it's very hard, and for those you need generalists. One of the biggest issues I had in the bank I was working for before is we had too many experts and very few generalists who knew the company end to end. Big issue, very hard to find the right people. So what's the dilemma here is what happens when you fail. You either go to one or the other side. Often it's the business, the running of the business, which takes most of the priorities. I give you another example to make it more concrete. Nokia, I don't know if you remember, was one of the leaders. Probably, yeah, it was #1 telecom provider. Phones, telecommunications, fashion, top-notch. They just forgot to innovate. They forgot about their strategic initiatives. They put all their money on running the business, getting all the money there. That was their focus. What happens after a while? The competition came big time, and they were already outdated. Apple, Samsung, Sony, they took them over. Yeah, this is very similar to what happens with Borders or blockbusters that we saw at the beginning. You're not able to cope with the changes in the market. You're too focused on running your business, too short term. So Nokia has been bought by Microsoft, as you know. What happens on the other end? There's companies who love to innovate, R&D. Ericsson was another huge telecom operator, one of the first one in the 1980s, 90s, the biggest one on telecommunication network. What happened to them? They went too much on the other side. They forgot to make money as a priority. They at one point had 100 R&D centers looking for patents and new things, but they forgot that to run they need those strategic initiatives. They need to run the business. They need to make money to feed that part. So there was a huge collapse in Ericsson. They stopped 90 of their R&D centers. They fired 60,000 people at once because they were not able to find the right balance. And just to conclude, if you know BlackBerry, they're struggling. They're still alive. They were very successful like Nokia, but they forgot about strategic initiatives. So they just ran their very nice BlackBerries. Every organization, every enterprise had BlackBerries. I remember having the first BlackBerry maybe 15 years ago. And today, what do I get at work? I get a Samsung, not a BlackBerry. Or an Apple, not a BlackBerry. So what's happening with the guy? They hired a new CEO a few years ago, and what he's trying to do is first run the business. That you need to do first. If you don't run, forget about the other part. Running the business means cutting costs, making the company viable. That makes money. And on the other hand, they're investing in new products. So they're launching much faster new phones. They're looking for partnership. They're talking about partnership with Google. So they're trying to focus on their core. So this is what's happening between this. So your organizations, they will be in the middle of this. You will notice, and I like that you think about this, are you more focused on the day-to-day? Are you more focused on the running of your business? Is that the priority, the short term, or are you more focused on the long term? Is it about the future and your operations struggle? Is you don't mind too much that the customers are not happy? I doubt that, but it could be. And how do you find that balance? I think that's the success on execution too. I have here this framework. I will explain that more in detail once we are present, because it's a bit complicated. Well, not complicated, but I like to take step by step. So it starts always with the formulation and the planning on the strategy. You have short-term objectives, which is more your running of your business, long-term objectives. So it's just basically in a framework where I just told you, trying to have a bit of formalization and alignment. I think the alignment, not just on the projects, but the alignment on the vision and it's key. It's key for cracking what we were saying, cracking the successful execution. And of course, you need to have short-term value and long-term. It has to feed back. So, if you want just to talk to terms that you're familiar, is on the left side you will have more the balance scorecard. I think for that they're very strong. This concept, this method. If you would look at the first of the balance scorecard 20, 30 years ago, their focus was on running the business on different dimensions, but running the business. They do talk about initiatives, but it's not their strength. I had some discussions with Bob Kaplan as well, that the focus was on the balance scorecard. And what happens on the right is the strategic initiative management. Some people call it project management, project portfolio management. I think it's more about strategic initiatives. You will have projects, of course, but this is a whole new space. And I know the balance scorecard guys are trying to cover this much stronger. I know, for example, PMI is interested. There are other organizations looking very much on this as well, and that's going to be the part of my session when I will be talking both on the plenary session after Jeroen on the 29th and in the afternoon, and the whole day workshop on the 30th is going to be about strategic initiative management and making the link between both sides. I think it's not because you do good strategic initiative management that you will be successful. The key is also making the link between these two worlds. And I'll use some examples as well. I'm not going to drill on that. We've already covered most of the time, but I'll talk about Apple. I think this is a very, very nice case on how to make it work, how to make the execution work. And back to the three areas I talked about knowing the market, the competition, internally very, very well organized, and have the right team at the right place with the right people. So very nice examples. I will also talk about some case studies from your region, some good, some bad. I know, for example, the bridge between Doha and Bahrain, the Causeway. This is something I like to look. I like to understand what went right, what went wrong. So there's several examples that we will discuss. And with that, I'd like to finish here. Very short introduction, about 35 minutes. So I just open the floor for any questions, any thoughts, any different views. You can have different views, of course. So I think the process is that you should type it here. You should type the question on your box there on the right hand, and I'll read it and I'll answer. We have about 5 to 10 minutes, so just put whatever you think and I'll answer us a few questions, and the rest we can have a talk, hopefully to see you there in a few weeks, in a few months, sorry. So any questions, just type it in. I think I will read them here on the box that I have. Okay, I got here the first question, and this is very specific about the balance scorecard. And the question is, why did the balance scorecard don't cover strategic initiative management since the beginning? So this is an excellent question, and I think was last year, Informa brought Bob Kaplan to, I think it was Doha and Riyadh. I was present there, and it was one of the questions raised to Bob is why didn't you think about strategic initiatives? the mean for making change and transforming the business, the future. And he said that at the point when they developed, they were more focused on something that is a bit more fixed, is running the business you can see, is more tangible, and that was their priority for them. And he thought that if he would have known that before and the importance of it, that he would include that in the model. And this is something that you see if you're familiar with the concept, that they're putting a lot of pressure on strategic initiative management. The other area that they're covering, I know from my talk too, is risk management. The Balanced Scorecard doesn't cover in-depth risk management, so that's another area they're working on. If you would look at the 8 from Jerome de Flandre, also speaker in a few months, he does talk about strategic initiative. One of the, if you want, the connection point between the two circles, that's strategic initiative management for Jerome. So it is there. It's just an area which I think there's much more to be done in terms of research, in terms of frameworks, and probably maybe also certifications and so on. So thanks for the questions. We'll talk about that more in detail. I think it's one of the hot topics anyway in the conference in Dubai. Any other questions? I'll give you a couple of minutes, and if not, we will finish there. So once again, you just need to type it in the question box and send to all. I suppose that's the button you need to talk or to press. There's another question. It's about the session, the workshop on the day, the 30. I run the same workshop already in Doha and Riyadh, and the feedback was very positive. It's very hands-on workshop with case studies and talking about, of course, frameworks, but making the link to your work and very practical. So it will not be very theoretical, and I think if you manage to attend, you will learn a lot. So thanks for that question too. Okay, so I will finish the session here. There's one last slide. So just remind you of the event is the 26th to the 30th of April. The address Dubai Mall. 3 global gurus, 6 hands-on workshops, and 32 thought leader speakers on strategy, with Rita McGrath and Jeroen as the key gurus. And I think, as usual, this is going to be one of the best events on the topic in the region. So I'll just encourage you to be there. And I hope to meet you in person. Bye-bye and see you soon. Take care. Hello?